along, I'm sure. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Arapahoe Library's Parenting Strategies program. I'm Betsy Brainerd, the Family Place Coordinator for the Arapahoe Libraries, and I'm joined by some of my colleagues on the Child and Family Library Services team tonight. Molly Lancaster, Mary Kuhner, and Lauren Graham. There they are. We'll all be turning our cameras off once the program gets underway. Family Place Libraries offer a broad range of support to families with young children, and in normal times, one of the main ways we do that is through the Parent-Child Workshop. But through these not so normal times, we are bringing you monthly virtual programs that we call Parenting Strategies. This afternoon, we are pleased to introduce you to Elizabeth Perryman and Jill Zasko, who are here to lead us through mindfulness for parents with young children. I think we will all be interested in that topic. We will have time for questions at the end of the program. However, if you have procedural or technical questions that need to be answered right away, please put them in the chat box and one of us will answer your question. If you have a question that you would like Elizabeth or Jill to respond to, please use the Q&A box for that. And now we welcome Elizabeth and Jill. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Betsy, and hello, everybody. We want to thank you so much for joining us for this webinar on mindful parenting of young children. And whether you're joining us live or watching the recording, we want to thank you for making this investment of your time. We know that in whatever capacity you're raising or working with young children, maybe as parents or grandparents or guardians, daycare providers, preschool teachers, etc., your time and energy are especially limited. And so we're sincerely honored by your presence in this space. And this is my new pandemic cat, so she may be walking in and out. My name is Elizabeth Perryman, and I serve as the curriculum coordinator as well as the pandemic response coordinator at a pre-K through grade 12 independent school in central New York. As our school has, like so many schools, well, schools all over the world really, navigated the uncharted waters of the pandemic, my personal mindfulness practice has been a source of great stability, an anchor with all of the turbulence. And over the years as an educator, I have seen the helpful benefits of mindfulness training for teachers, for parents, for students, especially as levels of unhealthy stress and anxiety are on the rise. I'm a certified mindfulness instructor through Mindful Schools. I have co-founded a wellness consultancy called Upstream Mindfulness. And I'm also the mom of two little boys who are now young men. And I'm delighted to be with you and also here with my good friend, Jill Zasko.
Yeah, I am delighted to, Elizabeth. And so for those of you who may or may not recognize me, Elizabeth and I have been teaching mindfulness-based stress reduction together before I came on board as one of the library specialists and now library specialist leads at the Smoky Hill branch. And some of you may also recognize me from another mindfulness program that we've been offering through our virtual events at ALD, a guided mindfulness meditation drop-in. But anyway, Elizabeth and I have met along the teacher training path for this extended course called Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction. And when Betsy reached out to inquire about doing a program for mindful parenting, I wanted to get Elizabeth involved because this is certainly an area of passion for her, working with children and with parents. And so, Elizabeth, thank you so much for coming on tonight and being our subject matter expert. And so as we get together and begin our time together, we would like to get a sense of the ages of your little ones so that we can tailor some of our suggestions to your particular needs. So if you feel comfortable doing so, we'll be launching just an anonymous poll with asking you just the ages of your child or children. And if you're a teacher or caregiver, feeling free to please choose all of the ages of children with which you work. And so we'll just give a few moments to let the poll responses come in here.
Great, so you should have the poll up in front of you now. And while you're completing the poll, let me start by saying that you are welcome, no matter how you are or how crazy things may be for you at the moment. This is coming into the witching hour of sort of that afternoon, evening time with young children. And we are recording this webinar, but I assure you that everybody's microphones are muted and no one is visible on the recording except for us and the slides. So if your toddler is running around in his birthday suit, or the dog is barking, or the cat is walking in front of your screen, or the baby is crying, or maybe you are crying, all of these things are really common occurrences in life with young children, and all are truly welcome. We understand the courage and energy that it takes to manage logistics and to carve out time to be present. And we really are grateful that you've done so.
Yeah, definitely. So our intention for this webinar, above all, is to be useful to you. And the value of mindfulness is in its application. So how does it apply to our role as parents and to everyday parenting practices? We'll be touching on that, of course. So during the webinar, we'll start by considering the what's and the why of mindful parenting. What is it and why might it be of value to you and your child? And we'll take some time to consider our intentions as parents and the quality of attention and attitude that we would like to bring to our parenting. Then in a little bit, we'll explain a bit of the brain science that underpins mindfulness practice, and along the way, engage in some actual practices that you can use to reconnect with your intentions and replenish your energies. So we'll share a few mindful activities that you can teach and do with your child, and then we'll set aside some time for questions, of course. And at the end of the time together, we'll share with you some more resources and let you know how you can continue to learn and practice more if you're interested. And as we begin our time together now, I'd like to recognize that the practice of mindfulness has a few key elements, namely attention, attitude, and intention. So as we begin this time of exploration and learning more about mindful parenting, first thing I'd like to invite you to do is just to take a few moments to connect with the intention which brought you to explore more by attending this talk on mindful parenting. So connecting with what we often refer to in mindfulness practice as the heart mind, or our inner knowing of thoughts and emotions. So letting go of any of that thinking and planning, that doing state that we are so often involved with throughout the day and throughout our parenting experiences. And just for a moment, I invite you to, find a comfortable seat. And you might also find that either lowering the gaze or closing the eyes is helpful for just a short period of reflection. Maybe taking a fuller, deeper breath, letting it go. Yeah. And even getting a sense of just fully arriving, and maybe the sense of sitting in your chair or on the couch or wherever you find yourself this afternoon. Just taking a few moments to arrive more fully and slow down. Maybe one more breath, and I'll offer just one question for some reflection. And the question would be, if you could simply enjoy being a parent without the need to do anything right, without fear of judgment from others, without pressure from the outside world or from your child's needs even, what would you do? How might you be? So just taking some moments, allowing whatever comes to mind and not needing to force the answers. There's no right or wrong answer here. And also leaving room perhaps for no response at all. So just taking a minute. Maybe it's something like the intention to increase your own ability to explore with curiosity, to learn and to grow, just like you wish for your child to explore, learn, and grow, or something like this. So just allowing a bit of pause here to connect with that intention. And just maybe wrapping up that thought, whatever's come to mind. And again, if you'd like to, return to the screen, you might open the eyes again and just want to say thank you for taking that time to connect with our intention.
Thank you, Jill. I appreciate your guiding us into a moment of taking a pause to check in with the intention. This is one of the hallmarks of mindful parenting. What do we mean when we say mindful parenting? Another way to describe the quality of mindful parenting might be parenting with presence, paying attention to what is happening in the present moment on purpose and with an attitude of kind curiosity rather than judgment. In any moment, and especially the difficult moments of parenting, it's easy and instinctive to wonder what is going on with my child. But it's harder to remember, but very, very important to remember to wonder, and what is going on with me in this moment? Yet being aware of how you're actually showing up in your parenting role is essential to the art of parenting with presence. Parenting mindfully involves a dimension of awareness that accompanies our day-to-day parenting activities. It's not so much about something you do over there and then come to your parenting. It's very much a moment-to-moment process. It involves being in close touch with ourselves and our intentions as parents. So as Jill invited us to consider our intentions that we might like to inform and infuse our parenting. Examples might be maybe bringing more calm, being more calm with our children, or paying closer attention to what they're saying or trying to say. Bringing an attitude of kindness and unconditional love to our parenting and also to ourselves as parents. But when things get busy, it's awfully easy sometimes to become untethered from those important intentions. And underlying all of the intentions is a big and really important why. Why would we do that? And the why is to build and maintain strong and lasting bonds with our children. The research on this is very clear. It shows that parent and child bonds created in early childhood continue to strengthen and support children as they grow and as they encounter external influences on down the road. So practicing mindful listening with your very talkative 3-year-old in and of itself is a very important thing to do to build trust and understanding with your child. But remember that while you're doing that, you are also creating a useful building block for healthy and safe communication within the family as your child goes through school and adolescence and on into adulthood. Now, with everything going on and so many distractions, and particularly now, it is hard to stay present. I just want to name the obvious. There are 1,000,001 things that are vying for our attention every day, and none more important than our children. Your child is the most important thing, and from the very moment of your child's birth, they will constantly and usually very loudly remind you of that fact. Mm-hmm. And as parents, we can build the capacity to be present by practicing. We practice being present. So practicing mindfulness is for the brain a little bit like weightlifting is for our muscles. Just as many sets and reps of lifting weights over time builds muscles and physical strength, we can strengthen our abilities to focus and pay attention by exercising these skills intentionally a little bit every day. For example, I'd love to start with a mindfulness exercise that will help us anchor our attention on something that only ever happens in the present moment, which is our breath. We can only breathe right now. So this is called hot chocolate breathing. Mm-hmm. So first of all, see if you can find a sitting or a standing position that is upright without being uptight. You want to be comfortable but alert, not so comfortable that you're about to fall asleep, but upright and alert. And now imagine that you are holding in your hands a mug of steaming hot chocolate, too hot to drink just yet. As you hold the mug in front of your nose, take a nice deep breath in through your nose, as if you're inhaling the aroma of the chocolate. And then pause slightly and purse your lips and blow slowly across the surface of the hot chocolate as if to cool it down through your mouth. And closing the mouth now and taking the next inhale again through the nose, smelling that hot chocolate, and exhaling by blowing slowly through the mouth. See if you can exhale fully by bringing the belly button back towards the spine. By sort of emptying out that air, it will increase the inhale on the next breath. So taking another couple of deep hot chocolate breaths at your own pace, inhaling through the nose and exhaling slowly and fully out by the mouth. And on your next exhale, closing the mouth and allowing your breathing to just return to its normal pace. In and out through the nose this time, if that's accessible this evening. And as you do so, just checking in with the body, particularly the shoulders. How are things in your shoulders? If you encounter any tightness there, just inviting the shoulders to drop a little bit on the exhale. Checking in as you're breathing with the muscles in the face, particularly around the forehead and the jaw. And if you notice any tension there, just inviting release on the exhale. Nothing big and dramatic here needed, just a tension. And a couple more breaths here at your own pace. Just relaxing and resting and the awareness of simply being in this particular moment in time. Taking a little break from being a human doing and practicing being a human being. Being right here, right now. Well, thank you. Thank you for doing that. For
great.
getting your pretending muscles on. And we just took about 8 to 10 breaths together. And I'm curious. I'm wondering, what did you notice about that experience? Just that simple experience of taking a few deep breaths and then some breaths and checking in with your body. And if it feels comfortable for you to do so, I'd invite you to type into the Q&A box. I think that's the way that we could see it on this end. Just a word or two or a sentence about anything you may have noticed just in this brief mindfulness practice. And as people are offering some observations, let me assure you that pretend hot chocolate breathing is a very big hit with the 5 and under crowd. But it can also be a really wonderful grounding practice to try with your first morning cup of tea or coffee, just when you're by yourself, or your hot chocolate if you have that in the morning.
Yeah. So Elizabeth, it looks like we have a couple of comments. Yeah,
Great.
so
Can you read them? So I'm
yeah,
not.
we're hearing relaxing, that it was relaxing and focusing, and also noticing it's hard to stop, from that doing perhaps, but so helpful to breathe and slow down for a few moments, and already feeling more relaxed, feeling much more calm. And also, it definitely made it easier to focus on right now instead of everything else. So yeah, it's
Great.
wonderful.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. I wonder if anybody had the sense of noticing maybe the tension around the jaw or the forehead or the shoulders. Did that come up for anyone, or may or may not have?
Yeah, sometimes some response that definitely the shoulders. Oh my goodness, such an area, right, of tension holding. But also, I didn't realize how tense my muscles were. So my shoulders dropped about 2 inches.
Yeah, yeah. That's just interesting. Thank you for chiming in on that. I wonder, that has been my experience also. Once you're aware or mindful of the tension, then you're able to do something to affect it. And the first critical key to mindful parenting is to check in with your own body first and notice things like a clenched jaw or maybe a balled fist. Just frustration maybe, or something like that. Sometimes we don't even notice these things. And then when you took a deep breath, you activated what's called the vagus nerve. It's a long and branching nerve that runs throughout the body. And breathing deeply and intentionally is like hitting a piano key that reverberates through the nervous system. And what it does is it triggers a calming response in our bodies. The autonomic nervous system, this may be review for some of you, is kind of in 2 parts. The sympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for the fight, flight, freeze, and faint response, tensed up, kind of ready to fight if we need to. When we're stressed and uptight, you can notice that effect when we're in a dramatic, stressed out place, but even the kind of built up over the day shoulders that we mentioned, that we don't always know are there until we check in. The other part of our nervous system is called the parasympathetic nervous system. This is what governs the rest and digest functions in our bodies. It's when the parasympathetic nervous system is in charge, our heart rate slows down, our blood pressure drops a bit, and our breathing becomes deeper. So we can actually trigger the activation of the parasympathetic nervous system by intentionally taking a few deep breaths. So when we do so, when we take the breath, it's almost like it triggers the nervous system to follow suit, and it allows us to just get a bit more calmer, and sometimes we can think more clearly, have a little bit more agency in that moment if we can kind of do that hack, if it were. So thank you for that feedback. And connecting regularly with the body like this, just with a few short breaths and just tuning in and noticing, is an investment in skillful parenting. Because being with young children takes a lot of energy, as you know. It's imperative, first and foremost, to take good care of ourselves so that we have plenty of resources from which to draw to do this important work. There's a saying that goes, you can't pour from an empty cup. And when our cup is empty and we're deplenished, we have little, if anything, to give to others, including to our children. But being mindful of our intention as parents and focusing into them regularly can help us remember to resource ourselves so that we can realize those intentions. In the words of flight attendants everywhere, it's important to secure your own oxygen mask before attempting to assist others. So in any day in the life of your busy life raising young children, this might look something like maybe instead of scrolling through your news feed on your phone first thing in the morning, just taking a little time to breathe with your hot tea, do a little hot tea breathing, and to ground into the intention that you've identified. For example, maybe to be more patient with your 2-year-old's meltdowns. And at the same time, asking yourself, how might I take care of myself today so that I have the best chance of living into this intention? A little true confession story here. When my son was a toddler, he threw a fit every time I tried to pull on his new snow boots. And these were the ones that he loved in the store. And it wasn't until several meltdowns later, both his and mine, that I realized that in the toe of one of the boots, it still had that crumpled up piece of paper that they stick in there to keep its shape. You've been walking around on them all day.
Oh, no.
And, so after that, I set the intention just to slow down and try to be curious about the possible causes of his meltdowns rather than jumping to conclusions and just charging ahead on autopilot. I also discovered that to resource myself in order to do that, I needed to reduce the number of errands that I tried to run in any one day in order to kind of buy myself a little time to live into that important intention. It's going to offer just one more quick handy suggestion that I learned also about meltdowns that I share with young parents everywhere, and it seems to work a lot, is to keep in your bag of tricks with you at all times one of those little bottles of bubbles, just the little tiny like party favor ones, because blowing bubbles is a sneaky way to help your child breathe in a way that calms her nervous system. When you're breathing through the bubbles and letting that exhale out, there's the vagus nerve getting that reverberation and triggering, giving her more help from her body to keep regulated. And you can talk her through that and tell her what's happening too. But it can also help you keep your own cool and stay closely aligned to that intention that you have as a parent.
I love that, Elizabeth. I'm going to have to get my own party favor bubbles.
I still have
I don't know
them
if
in my
that's going to
glove
work.
compartment.
Yeah. Christina jumped in with a comment that she really likes that for every parent. So thank you for that comment. Yeah, it's great. And even for those of us that are dog parents, I don't know, I'm going to try that with my cattle dog later and see if that helps with his meltdowns. So why don't we take another moment here just to turn toward those intentions once again, really letting kind of some of that sink in, maybe placing a little marker here to take time to practice breathing with our hot chocolate breath, whether it be over the morning coffee or that cup of tea in the evening. Really, again, finding ways to incorporate small moments of mindfulness throughout the day. Doesn't have to be a big event. And at the same time, giving ourselves permission to take that break, and even permission to not always perfectly achieve our intentions, but knowing that accepting our imperfections without that self-recrimination or judgment is part of the mindful parenting equation. So it allows us to parent with greater ease and assures that we keep learning and growing along the way, always fostering that sense of curiosity and what we might call in mindfulness practice as beginner's mind, or like this childlike mind, just willing to discover what's here and letting go of that harsh criticism, giving ourselves permission to be human. So
yeah, it's really, really important, that word permission, and also curiosity. When all else fails and you're not sure what to say, I often say with all children and with myself sometimes, almost to give myself a chance to, wonder what's going on here. What's going on with me? What's going on with you? Rather than to launch in. And it keeps that curious edge and keeps me open instead of sort of closed or making assumptions that might not be correct. Parenting young children is difficult under the best of circumstances. And it is, of course, especially challenging in the midst of a global pandemic. We want to thank you truly for heroically protecting and raising young human beings in the great pandemic of 2020, 2021. There is no playbook for you to go by, but I want to let you know that you can trust those heartfelt intentions that you identify. That is your playbook. And so opening the playbook every morning and reading the intentions, that is the way forward. So I can't see, or at least I'm not sure how to look for it. Jill, can you maybe see, according to the poll that we took at the beginning, I'd love to get a sense of how many kiddos, what ages are we parenting generally?
Yeah. So we've got about 23% of newborn to 1-year-olds. About 38% of you are taking care of a 1-year-old. Another 30% are 2-year-olds. So we've got it all across the board here. And then 3-year-olds is another almost 40%. 4 years old, about 30%, and 5 years old, about 62%. So, and 6 years old and older, about 38%. So obviously, if you add all those numbers up, it's greater than 100, but that's because we probably had multiple answers for the same person. So yeah, we're not scoring on math here, but that's what's here. And right now, no one responded that they're expecting a baby, but perhaps somebody watching the recording at a later date will be. So.
All right. Oh my goodness. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your children with us just through that poll. I love to think about that. I'm sure there's some siblings out there and things, all kinds of crazy dynamics going on in your house. And thank you for giving us that little glimpse in. As Jill was reading those off, I was thinking, each of these age groups can bring a whole host of worries and wonders and fears. I imagine that floating out there with all parents, I'm going to guess that some of these might be true for you. You may be wondering about your children's health and safety in the midst of all the pandemic stuff. You might be wondering about the pandemic's effect on their long-term development. It could be worried about the time they are spending on screens while you are spending time on screens, perhaps. If they're developing appropriately, if they're spending enough time with you, if they're spending too much time with you, if they're eating enough, if they're getting enough physical activity, if you're parenting them correctly, just so many things to wonder about. And I just wanted to name also that, because it's in the news a bit, you may have also heard about adverse childhood experiences, shortened sometimes to the acronym ACEs or ACEs, that can affect the long-term physical and mental health of children. And unfortunately, it is true that the pandemic will qualify for some as an adverse childhood experience for many children. But the good news is that the potentially harmful effects of ACEs can be mitigated by the presence of just one caring adult in a child's life. And I am heartened because the fact that you've taken time to attend a webinar like this one is an indication of your love and concern for the child or the children in your life. And I encourage you to let that reality sink in. You are already intervening in ways that are positively affecting your child's healthy growth and development and protecting them from the very things that you may be worried about. So as you're having your moments of connection with intention, I hope that you can hear our words of reassurance and encouragement to you. You are on the right track, and your little ones are lucky to have you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So why don't we do this? I'd like to invite us all to take a moment, now that we're about halfway or more so through the webinar. Again, always in mindfulness practice, trying to strengthen that mind-body connection and our ability to pay attention to what's going on with us. So you might just right now sense into what you might do to move your body in a way that might feel good. Maybe taking the time to stretch your arms, maybe reaching a big stretch overhead. Maybe you want to spend a little bit more time with those shoulders. As we know, it can be just such a point of holding tension. So doing a few shoulder rolls. What I like to do is bring the shoulders all the way up to the ears. We can work with a little muscle tension and then letting those release. Maybe noticing a feeling of relaxation or the relative relaxation between tension and relaxing, remembering to breathe. Maybe you want to do a few neck rolls, just very carefully, always being mindful of, what's right for your body right here, right now. So just taking a little time to attend here. And again, this idea of checking in with ourselves first, and then taking a moment to notice what's present in our own bodies, whether it be tension or tiredness. Maybe there's a little hunger or whatever you might find. Just discovering for a few moments, just offering our bodies some attention, what that can do. And to help build mindful pauses into our day and even into our interactions with the kids. In fact, it's a great thing to stop and do with your little ones, as it helps them to build the behavior too of noticing and strengthening the connection of paying attention to the body. So a wonderful little pause. When we're feeling those moments of restlessness or anxiousness or frustration, or maybe just wanting to take that moment to slow down and do something a little different, just some mindful stretches, and you can model those with the kids. And I'm sure they might be happy to offer you a couple of suggestions of how to move the body. Again, injecting a little bit of playfulness into the practice of mindfulness in everyday life.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good way to when you're making a transition to another thing that we want to focus our intention on, having a period of movement kind of shakes things up a little bit and then lets the glitter settle, as they say, kind of brings the attention back. So thank you for that, Jill. My shoulders feel better. And so now I would like to introduce a little brain science here to this webinar on mindful parenting of young children. And this to help us understand more about what makes us and our children tick. So an important thing for us to know is that our adult brains, your adult brain is fully developed. It may not feel like it, especially during this pandemic, but it is. Your child's brain is not yet fully developed, and it won't be for a couple of decades. So Dr. Dan Siegel is a professor of psychiatry and an author of several books about applying neuroscience to parenting. Some of these books, like The Whole Brain Child and Parenting from the Inside Out, are available through the Arapahoe Library District. And we've noted these and some other good resources on a list that we'll provide to you after this presentation. So Dr. Siegel developed a nifty, as he says, a handy hand model of the brain to explain the different parts of the brain and their various functions, not only to parents and teachers, but to children, so that we can all understand more about why we act the way we act and what we might be able to do about it. So for those of you who haven't seen this, briefly, you imagine that your wrist is the spinal cord, and it draws up through the neck to the brain stem in the palm of your hand. If you fold your thumb into the palm, you create the limbic system. I invite you to play along at home if you like. The limbic system that works with the brainstem to govern basic survival responses, detecting threats, responding with that fight, flight, or freeze mode. When your child has been startled and grabs onto you, you are experiencing those automatic reactions that come from this area of the brain. The same goes for your instinctive tight hold on your child when you detect a threat. So this area of the brain in human development is the first to develop, the earliest development. So already your little ones have that pretty well on board. Now, if you fold your fingers over your thumb, you've created the cerebral cortex, this part that goes along the back of your head and curves down around. This is the area responsible for perception and thought. This part of the brain takes a little longer to develop fully. So the fingertips of the cerebral cortex are the prefrontal cortex. So if this were my brain in my head, it would be oriented this way. The prefrontal cortex is right here behind the forehead. And this is the area that governs rational thought, self-control, executive functioning, planning, this kind of thing. It's the last part of the brain to develop, which many parents of teenagers can affirm, which those of us who have been teenagers can affirm. So even in adults whose prefrontal cortices are fully developed, when we get tired or hungry or overwhelmed, our prefrontal cortex can lose its grip and we can flip our lids, as Dr. Siegel says. And thinking at that point goes out the window and we're left at the mercy of our more primitive responses. This might look like when you lose it with your spouse or with your child or with both. Mm-hmm. And the good news is that we can regulate our nervous system so that our prefrontal cortex remains in charge or can come back online. And rational thought is restored. And we owe it to our children to do so because their immature nervous systems hook in to our mature nervous systems to stay regulated. If you imagine little possums or little monkeys riding on their parents' back through the jungle because their arms and legs and tails aren't yet quite long enough or strong enough to support them high in the branches of the trees, nervous systems in humans are a little bit like this. And we can see this phenomenon of latching on to an adult nervous system when our babies begin taking their first steps. When they fall down on their little puffy bottoms, they look up to us for cues. Maybe you know this from your own child. And if we say, uh-oh, you fell down, you're okay, let's try again, and help them up, we're transmitting the message that their mirror neurons pick up on and emulate. Oh, I must be okay. And generally speaking, unless they're hurt, they're following your lead. We can also observe a different effect if we respond in a more activated way. Oh my gosh, you fell. You fell down. Are you okay? We know what's likely to happen. Often that'll be the thing that brings on the tears, even if there wasn't a big accident. And that's just simply how our nervous systems are working, co-regulating. So it's important to realize that our own well-regulated nervous system is the best intervention. It's better than any discipline strategy, any training book you can have. It's the way that you can show up with your child that intervenes in this very organic, holistic, natural way. And so since that's the case, the investment in taking care of yourself first really is the best way to help your child. Let's see, we have a slide that if Molly could show the one about the mind. Yeah, that's the one. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so as Elizabeth was just describing this process, this is a slide from Mindful Schools. And as we were talking about at the beginning, like the what, we've heard a little bit about the what of mindfulness practice. We'll look at that a little bit more. And I guess this speaks to the why too. So we're all familiar with that stimulus. Something happens, an event, the child is clinging onto the leg, having the reaction. We may be having our own reaction. So without mindfulness, that just goes straight through. With mindfulness practice, with this capacity we have to hold things in our awareness without necessarily judging them or adding to them, we can actually intervene in that stimulus reaction chain and instead have more of a skillful response around what happens. So it looks like stimulus, something happens. We apply mindfulness, a little bit of an interruption, a pause before we react. And therefore, we are instead responding with a little bit more skill. And again, without the mindfulness can be considered maybe a buffer for our automatic reactions. The key here is to the more we engage with our intention and cultivate those attitudes of mindfulness, non-judging, giving ourselves permission to check in, giving ourselves permission to pause, the more space we have to consider our choices around parenting, and then responding again to our own needs, putting that oxygen mask on for ourselves first, and then responding to what the kids need. So that just takes a little practice to disengage from that autopilot that we're so often finding ourselves on, or especially as we're taking on the intentions of becoming more mindful, we may notice that. And again, that's not a reason to, judge ourselves or criticize ourselves. It takes practice to disengage and to become more responsive rather than reactive. So even a short daily practice like the hot chocolate breathing, like just taking some moments of working with the breath space and interspersing those into your day rather than trying to make mindfulness an event can be quite helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Jill. And thank you, Molly, for sharing that slide. If you wouldn't mind taking that down at this point. Thank you. The short practices that Jill's talking about can be done anytime, anywhere. They can be as simple as bringing awareness to the things that we often do on autopilot, like washing the dishes or washing the toddler. When you really enlist all your senses, you notice all kinds of details that you can narrate with your young child. It's a wonderful thing to build their vocabulary and their ability to notice. And that can keep you present and engaged in the activity that you're doing. So during bath time, for instance, you can feel the warmth of the water or the softness of your child's skin. You can notice the rainbows and the bubbles and see what your child notices. You can enlist your hearing. You can say, we could do it right now. If we could say, hey, let's listen for the drip, drip, drip of the water faucet. If we did that right now, I could ask you wherever you're sitting, just at the moment, to maybe lower your eyes for just a second and listen to the sounds in your environment. There's no need to go reach for anything. There's probably some sounds that you can hear. I'm hearing traffic. You might hear somebody yelling or dogs barking. So there's this kind of way of when you pay the attention to what's happening in the present, you're noticing things that you didn't notice before. That can be a fun thing to play with your kids. Say, if you're in the car waiting, what can we hear? Just tuning in, because every time you do that, your brain is creating neural pathways towards greater ability to stay focused and attention. This is that weightlifting again. So that when you need to insert that mindfulness between the stimulus and your response, you've already built the capacity to do so through all these little, very informal practices. They say that the neurons that fire together wire together. So the more we practice, the greater the ability to be mindful in our parenting. Now, speaking of listening, I do want to touch on one voice that no parent can ever fail to hear on an all too regular basis, and that is the voice of our own inner critic. Raising young children is exhausting because their legitimate needs are so great. And none of us will be able to respond mindfully in every instance. I don't care how many mental weights you have lifted. We will inevitably do and say things that we regret. It just happens. But I can tell you from experience, long experience, that if beating ourselves up about our parenting mistakes actually made us better parents, we would all have it figured out by now. It really doesn't help. And as it turns out, one of the most effective tools in a parent's toolbox is self-compassion. This is not to be confused with self-pity or even with self-care. Self-compassion is offering yourself a level of kindness and encouragement that you would offer to a good friend who was in the same boat. It's industrial strength kindness. It's the mirror image of the golden rule, treating yourself in the way that you would like to be treated by others and would like to be able to treat others. There's tons of science behind the value of parents practicing self-compassion. Because when parents are kinder to themselves, they are kinder and more patient with their children. And the bond of that connection is strengthened. Self-compassion practice is immediate and it is practical. There's a leading researcher in this field named Kristen Neff, and again, we'll put her on our resource list so you can study it further in self-compassion. And she honed her practice through the often intense experience of parenting a child with autism. This was not some theory-based thing. This was right in the thick of things. So what does this self-compassion look like, just practically speaking? So let's say you have had a long day at work and everybody's hungry and you're trying to cook dinner and the children are squabbling. So Molly, if you could throw up that third slide, I'd appreciate it. There's a little acronym here that many of you perhaps have already seen or maybe worked with Jill on or seen someplace else. Stop, stop. But in this case, for mindful parenting, let me just walk you through it. If you can remember in any moment to stop, the S stands for stop what you're doing. Literally put down the spatula, turn off the heat, and then take a deep, nourishing breath, a really intentional breath. That's the T. And then the O is observe what is happening. And not so much with the kids squabbling and the dinner not being late, but what is happening in your own body and emotions. How am I right now? And see if you can name how you're feeling. You might be frustrated or feeling helpless or incompetent or simply fed up. Often Dr. Siegel says, if we can name it, we can tame it. If you can, and this is great with your kids too, giving them vocabulary around emotions. Once you've kind of got what it is that you're feeling and how you are, then the P in this case is permission. Give yourself permission first to congratulate yourself for heroically parenting during a global pandemic and know that you're not alone. All parents everywhere experience these kinds of really uncomfortable circumstances and emotions. As best you can, try not to take it personally. Here's that good friend coming in again and some nice, nourishing self-talk. This situation is not happening because you're a bad parent or because you have the worst kids in the world. You can skip that negative self-talk and give yourself a literal pat on the back instead, or a hug. Stimulate that body, get that parasympathetic nervous system to come to your aid. You can place a hand on your heart and say something like, what would you tell a friend in this situation? Whoa, this is really hard. And you're gonna be okay. You've got this. I'm here for you. Even if it's you, here for you. That again, that touch can be very, very powerful, believe it or not. Give yourself permission to take a step away, to call for reinforcements, to call dominoes. I mean, whatever serves at that point. Permission. That is going to build that muscle within you of putting that oxygen mask on so skillfully that you're able to then respond in ways that are nourishing and supportive for your family. So thank you, Molly, for putting up the stop there. That can come off if you'd like to take it down. Thank you.
And I know we want to leave a little bit of room for questions. We're coming up on time. So Elizabeth, are we going to be sending out a little refresher on that stop practice?
Yes.
So I think we have a couple of questions on just making sure we understand what the steps are, but really quickly to run through it is just stop means first stop, pause, take a breath, observe what's going on, specifically with ourselves, and then give ourselves permission to take that in and to adjust our sails. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate your drawing my attention to the time. I was not being as mindful as I should have been on that. So, and I actually can't see the questions, so that if there are any questions that you want to highlight, please do. And then I know Betsy would like a few minutes at the end to make some announcements.
Yeah. So feeling free to pop those questions into the Q&A. I think we have answered all the ones that have come in thus far. I'll just check in case people are using the chat too.
We probably have just about a minute for, there's so much to want to share with you all. And, but a big part of caring for yourselves is sharing with other parents that are in this part of the adventure, and sharing your discoveries and your struggles.
Okay. So I don't see anything. Let me see if there's something. Yeah. So any advice for single parents or solo parents for when we just can't call for reinforcements? How do we resource?
That is such a good question. I'm glad you brought it up. As a single parent myself, I really can relate to this. And there is always dominoes. Boy, keep that on speed dial. There's your reinforcements. But it not to be glib about this, it is true that part of taking care of yourself so that you can show up is to have a plan. Think about, if you do kind of have to think about, if there was an emergency, or is there a neighbor that I could call? Is there a good friend that I could call? So that you already have sort of those resources in your hip pocket, so to speak, sort of like your bubbles. Because it is true, your greatest resource is yourself, and yet we all need reinforcements. We all need help, and not to be afraid at all to ask for it. So those are great conversations to have, maybe with close friends or neighbors who could literally come right over, or if you needed to step out. But best to have those conversations ahead of time. That's a very mindful thing to do, to really realize that that might be something that you would want to take advantage of. Set that up ahead of time. That's a wonderful way to fulfill an intention, to be present for your children in every moment.
Yeah. And if I could just add really quickly, it's the remembering that there is a shared experience of being that single parent or solo parent, that we're not alone.
Yeah.
Sometimes when we're in the midst of it, it's hard to remember that, but it goes back to touching in with intention, touching in with what's true in our own experience, acknowledging it. But then, keeping in mind that plan, maybe even writing it down for yourself so it's something that you can refer to, or, putting together a little bit of a, your own oxygen mask kind of kit, so those things that help to nourish you, and you can discover that along the way by taking those pauses. Okay, let me see if there are other questions.
I'm going to stop talking now because I realize we really are coming to time. And Jill, I know you wanted to mention about the groups at the library, and Betsy wanted to say a couple things.
Yeah. So just real quickly, as I mentioned at the beginning, I know some of you here may already be partaking in our Tuesday and Thursday guided mindfulness meditation sessions. There's no experience needed to come and join. Of course, it's on the library's website, the same place where you found the Mindful Parenting, this program today. So you would just travel on over to arapahoelibraries.org and then come over to the virtual events, type in mindfulness, and then you're going to find on Tuesdays, I'll be guiding a meditation session and talking a little bit more about mindfulness with a group that's been getting together each Tuesday at 10 a.m. and then Thursdays at 6 p.m. So we had our session this morning, so you can go ahead and jump right in if you'd like more practice on Thursday evenings. We've got plenty of space there. Yeah. And let's see. So looks like Molly's thank you, Molly, for sharing that. I'm going to see if I can share. Yeah. Oops.
Oh, I'd just like to say thanks so much.
Yeah.
for being here and giving those awesome ideas. I think we all feel a little more relaxed just having gotten those few tips, and I know it's going to be hugely useful to all the parents who are able to join us today. Thanks to everyone for being here, and I'd just like to draw your attention to a couple of other programs that Child and Family Library Services will have. Our parenting strategies next month is called Ready to Read, and the early literacy librarian staff is going to help you choose just the right book for your child at each different age. And second, we will have a kids yoga program that's being put on by our programming department that might be of interest to you. So a little form of mindfulness for children. So thanks again. You can see that information on that slide. Any final words, Elizabeth or Jill?
It's been a blast to be here and to know of everyone's interest. And I love the children's yoga that's ongoing. So just look forward to more chances to connect. And so thank you, Betsy and everyone at ALD. And thank you, Elizabeth, for sharing your expertise with us.
My very real pleasure, and so much gratitude to the library, to Betsy and Molly, and everybody helping out, and for all of you who have attended and who may be watching this, just sending you so much love and encouragement. And if we can be resources, please let us do it. So thank you for this opportunity.
Can I just, Mary, can I quickly interject that there is one more question that was how will we get paperwork? I'm not sure what the paperwork.
Yeah, I think the idea was that we would be able to send to the attendees list a little email with the resources and things. Probably do that tomorrow.
Yes, and we will also have a book list available on our website.
Yep.
But we will email it to you. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
All right, take care.